A very good afternoon to all. Welcome to the third day of National Science Week celebrations at Manipal Center for Natural Sciences, MAHE. In the last 2 days, we had talks on quantum physics, about Homi Baba, mega science program in India, and natural disasters. Today, our first talk is on global biodiversity and conservation towards a sustainable future by Dr. Vivek Pandi. It is a pleasure to introduce Dr. Vivek Pandi. He did his master's in botany from University of Madras. His PhD was on plant ecology from Pondicherry University. While doing his PhD, he was also a JRF and SRF in an All India coordinated project funded by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Then he worked as a postdoctoral research fellow at Goa University. Currently, he is an assistant professor at Manipal Center for Natural Sciences, MAHE. His research interests are biodiversity and ecology of lianas, woody climbers. He is currently working on evolutionary perspectives of climbing behavior in plants. He has published 15 research articles and 4 chapters. He is one of the leading data contributors for the Global Liana Ecology Project from India. He is also a data contributor for Global Big Trees Database and Global Plant Trait Database. Welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Navya, for the very nice introduction. I would like to thank the director, Manipal Center for Natural Sciences, and the organizing committee for giving me this opportunity to interact with you today on this very special occasion of National Science Day Week celebrations 2022. All right. Biodiversity conservation and climate change, the biodiversity crisis, is one of the most challenging tasks that is upfront for the humankind. When the entire world is witnessing the devastating effects of global climate change and the ever-increasing anthropogenic pressure, I wanted to discuss this topic among the students and also the scholar communities, because we are not just progressing towards the development of science and technology, and also we are equally progressing in depleting the forests and the biodiversity loss and also increasing in the climate change crisis. So the saddest part is how many of us do realize it. That has been the saddest part. So I'm taking this opportunity today to discuss with you the need for conserving the biological diversity towards sustainable future, and also to ensure the humankind live in peace and harmony with the nature. So having said that, I'm not going to discuss something which is unfamiliar among you all. In fact, biodiversity, climate change, and biodiversity crisis are some of the most commonly used terminologies in the recent times. I mean, at least in the last 2-3 decades. And such has been the impact, of this climate crisis, not just in the popular talks or in the magazine columns, but also in the research articles. As you can see from here, the total number of publications addressing biodiversity and climate change has increased significantly from 1992, since the inception of the Convention of Biological Diversity, and also after the Rio or the Earth Summit that happened in 1992. If you can see, in 2016, it has already crossed the 20,000 mark. By now, probably it would have reached more than 25,000 per year. So that has been the impact, as I was discussing already. Similarly, the total fundings that has been generated only from the US and Canada based on the public resource funding is been increasing constantly. So what it says, it clearly says the seriousness of the issue. But how many of us are taking it very seriously? If I ask this question in front of you all, how many of us are taking it very seriously? In fact, none of us, but we take it very seriously only when there is a conference, when there is a seminar, when there is a global organization meeting on a particular day. That is very clear from the number of media articles that has been published All these peaks that you see from here are corresponding to some of the major global meets that held in the last 20 years. So what we are doing in the rest of the years? We are busy with our works, is it? Yeah. So it is not the media people that are to be blamed. It's not the scientists. It is not the policy makers. In fact, it's a collective responsibility of all of us to address this issue. So moving into the formal presentation, I would like to read the quote by Professor William F. Lawrence. We are like a 2-year-old playing with fire. We are messing around with something really dangerous and don't understand what will happen. I personally like this quote because seriously, we don't really understand what we are playing with and what will happen. All right. So I'll move into the formal presentation now, asking you a very formal question of what is biodiversity. You might have heard this term very often across your textbooks, as I showed in the newspaper articles, newspaper columns, popular talks. But do we really understand the real meaning of it? Biodiversity refers to the variety of life forms on the planet Earth. Whatever that we see around, whatever we don't see around, the microorganisms, plants, animals, vertebrates, invertebrates, fungi, everything is included under one single umbrella, which is biodiversity. So as per my understanding, biodiversity is nothing but it's equivalent to sum of all living organisms on the planet Earth. Don't ask me the possibilities of having living forms or life forms other than Earth. So this talk is particularly restricted to all life forms within Earth. Fine. So why biodiversity? Why do we need diversity first of all? Forget about biodiversity. Why do we need biodiversity? So let me show you some pictures here. So this is the tropical forest canopy where you can see different species from the top. And this is palm oil plantations in the Southeast Asia with just one species. So I leave it to you to decide which one do you like, which one gives you more appealing. First one, of course, I will also go with the first one. In case if you're not convinced, I have one more example for you. What if you all look similar? Does it look good? So diversity is essential for all of us. Of course, none of us look the same, like what is showing in the figure. Biodiversity basically operates at 3 different levels. Ecosystem diversity, we have different ecosystems like desert ecosystem, marine ecosystem, coastal ecosystem, forest ecosystems. Within forests, we have many ecosystems. So each of these ecosystems are very unique, and the organisms present in each of these ecosystems are very unique to the particular environment wherein they interact with each other. And we have a species diversity. It's as simple like the variety of life forms, a variety of species present in the particular ecosystem. And we have something called genetical diversity. So the genetic diversity is the variation that is found among the individuals of the same species. We all look dissimilar. Though we all are humans, we all belong to the same species. And that's because of the genetic diversity. As shown in the figure, they all look very different, but they are human beings. So what is happening in the biodiversity? Biodiversity is actually a very complex web. By saying so, I'll give you a example. So these insects, bees, are depending on the nectars that are produced inside the flowers of this plant or this tree. In turn, they do the service of pollination. So after the pollination, the flowers develops into fruit. Those fruits are fed by the fruit bats and other frugivores. They in turn help these plants in dispersing their seeds. Those seeds regenerate as seedlings, and those excreta helps to enrich the nutrients in the soil, and those nutrients are again taken by the plants. Again, they produce flowers, fruits. So this is how they are all interconnected. So it's a well-planned mechanism that has been operating since very long time. But now, what will happen because of the climate change or human activities? Imagine what if this interaction is distracted? Let me ask you in a very simple way, what if we lose one species or one species disappear from this network? For example, I can show you these insects, pollinators, the bees. If they disappear from this network, what will happen? You can still say there are many other pollinators who can perform the same function, right? It makes sense, I agree with you all. But there are some, it is not true with all the species. For example, we have keystone species. The keystone species are the defining factor of the environment. Their absence can make a huge impact in the environment. In fact, at worst case scenario, it can even deplete the environment. So I will give you one such example of this is another interesting example within the banyan tree of co-evolution. How this banyan tree of the huge size is depending on a small wasp. This is the life cycle of the small wasp that determines the future of this banyan tree. Like, see, a pollen-laden female from wasp enters the syconium of an unripe fig through an opening called ostiole. There's a small opening. There are about 815 species pantropically, and all of these species have a unique pollinators. Only they can do this pollination service. Nobody else can do. So essentially, if this species is lost, the whole cycle is lost, and the whole species is lost. So I'll not take much time on explaining this coevolution process, but then I'll tell you, if this species is lost, there are more than 600 bird species and mammals which are depending on this keystone species for their survival. They are frugivores. So what will happen to those 600 species? It may sound little less, 600 is nothing, but those 600 species may be the pollinators for many other tree species, many other plant species, where they will go for the pollinators. So those, if they are not getting their pollinators, they may have been the food resource for many other animals. So this is how even a small impact can create a huge disaster if keystone species are lost. So now I have to ask you the question again, what will happen if one species disappear? And probably you have to shift your answers now, right? So these are some of the topics that we will discuss in the session. How many species are there, extinction rates, nature of the threats, climate change, adaptation, current status of the biodiversity, conservation efforts. I mean, what are the conservation efforts and what next? So biodiversity in numbers, this is one of the most interesting question, one of the most easiest question to ask, but a very difficult question to answer. If I ask you how many species are there in this auditorium, it will be easy for you to answer. Probably human beings, Homo sapiens, there may be lizards, there may be mosquitoes, it's countable. But if I ask you how many species are there in the whole planet, is it possible? Is it possible? Okay, it is not possible for anyone to have the exact numbers, but there are a lot of estimates. Many scientists across the world, they worked towards estimating the species diversity of the planet. I will share with you some of the interesting stories that scientists have gone through. One of the famous entomologists from United States of America in the 1980s, he was very curious, he wanted to estimate the total number of species in the planet. He went to the tropical rainforest with the herbicide or the pesticide. He sprayed it all over the canopy, and he collected around 1,200 species on the forest floor. And he collected 163 species of beetles from one species. So based on that, he estimated that there may be around 30 million species surviving in this planet. But it was not well received because he has considered only the beetles. Though beetles are one of the largest groups in zoology or zoological taxonomy, he has not considered plants and microorganisms, hence it was rejected. Later, people came up with a novel idea of estimating the diversity of microorganisms. Scientists all around the world, they have collected samples from around 35,000 sites and came up with a number which is 1 trillion. So they estimated that there are around 1 trillion species surviving in the planet. So if you ask me the range of living organisms surviving in the planet, I would say 5 million to 1 trillion. It sounds funny, right? This is similar to if someone asking for a bank balance from the banker and the banker replies to you, your balance is somewhere between 5 rupees to 100 rupees. It sounds the same, right? So what happened? There is one more group very recently in 2020, not very recently, in 2020, about a decade ago, they came out with a patterning of biodiversity, and they gave the estimate of 8.7 million species in the planet. So this is considered as the most valid estimate till date. How many species are known to us? So this is only the estimate. How many species we have described, how many species we have cataloged so far. These are the species that they have estimated. And how many species is known to us? Hardly 25% of the species has been cataloged. And rest all are either yet to be discovered or not known to us. What is the proportion of biomass in the whole of the planet? What is our proportion? Occupy just 0.01% of the total biomass, yet controlling the whole system. I'll tell you why. So let us see some of the threats that has been posed on the environment or on the biodiversity, like which is equivalent to species extinction, resource exploitation, deforestation, desertification, pollution, acidification, and invasiveness. I have not included any of the geological events because I'll show you why in the later slides. All these are human induced. Let us see it one by one. Of course, this is not complete without including climate change, which is fundamentally connected to all of these threats. Habitat fragmentation is one of the major issues that leads to species extinction. So imagine yourself as a rabbit or a squirrel living in a dense forest, which is having a wider area of extent once upon a time. And you form, and humans go, they settle there, they construct a road which divides the forest into two different halves or unequal halves or as a small habitats or islands within the land. So if you have to cross the other side, which was once accessible to you, you may have to cross the road, and that may be the end of your life sometimes. So what happens? They tend to stay in the same isolated location. There is every chance of inbreeding. So that's a huge loss, right? Next. This map clearly shows the biodiversity loss that has happened in Bornean Islands between 2000 and 2017. 87% of the global palm oil requirements are being supplied from Malaysia and Borneo, for which they have depleted around some lakh square million meter areas of forested land. Once on a forest, all these black patches are the oil palm plantations cleared from the forest. So they were trying to make around saying that after the palm oil farms are formed, they were trying to say that it still looks green from the top. But CIFOR, one of the foundations in Indonesia, Center for International Forestry Research, they have observed and monitored this deforestation event on a regular basis, and they produced this report. Actually, these dark spots are not the forest, but the plantations. So as a result of this deforestation and habitat fragmentation, some of the threatened carnivorous plants like picture plants are now endangered, which is they're already endemic plants not found elsewhere in the world. They're already threatened. And it has made the life of these orangutans even more worse. Once they used to get a lot of food from the forest, all the forest resources are depleted. So they have to find a shelter with the humans, and they have to fight with the humans for their survival now. Leads to human-animal conflicts. This is one of the places where you get a lot of orangutans. All of them are endangered now, and they are not found elsewhere. So this has been a sad story of Borneo. This is not just in Borneo. In fact, it's happening in almost all of the tropical forest countries, particularly in Brazil. But because of the strict laws in the recent times, they have stopped it considerably. So this has been the beauty of the nature. They are highly resilient. Just leave it to them. Give them some time to recover. They will come back. Species extinction is one of the major threats. When I say the word species extinction, immediately these two animals would come, like one bird and animal will come to your mind, the dodo and the Tasmanian tiger. But in fact, there are many other species which are not known to us. See, around 900 species has been lost since 1500s. And there are many species which are lost even before they are discovered and catalogued. I'm surprised with these numbers, fungi, corals, and chromates. There are no extinction reports because I believe that these are the organisms which are not thoroughly studied, and hence there is no chance for them to record the extinction rates as well. And particularly the species such as endemic species and rare, endangered, threatened category species are more vulnerable for this kind of extinction. IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, one of the premier bodies, governing bodies globally, they have analyzed only 130,000 species globally and estimated that 35,000 species are threatened. But still these numbers, 130,000 is just the representation of less than 1% of the total life forms in the planet. So this 35,000 is nothing. So what causes extinction? Extinction is not happening because of one reason. There are multiple factors operating at the same time and causes extinction. As you can see from this graph, overexploitation becomes the major reason for the species extinction. Agriculture, urban development, invasive disease, pollution, landscape modification, climate change, human disturbance, transport, energy production, and at last, you have geological events. So no, I hope now you understand why I have not included geological events in the beginning. It's a natural phenomena. We cannot have a control over it. But all other things are in our hand. We still can control it. All right. The major threats for the plants is because of their edible features, commercial and medicinal values. In India, there are around 2,142 species which are threatened, and globally there are around 35,000 species. So all this time I've been saying something negative about the biodiversity loss, and there is something positive to share about this here. For example, the aquaculture has taken over the wild fish catch in the recent times, both in global scenario as well as in India. This is something to be a little happy about it. Deforestation, as I said, the vast, huge land of or huge forest packs once upon a time were supporting a huge diversity of animals, plants is now converted into plantations, mainly for the commercial purposes. And that has become one of the major threats because the animal species, the bird species, once they were depending on the local tree species for their food and survival, they cannot get it anymore. And some of the plants, some of the species cannot migrate to other places. So they vanish from the environment. So this is again one of the most dangerous things that is happening right now. Most of the dry forests globally are prone to desertification. Almost 20% of the dry forests have already become gone deserts. So this happens because of two reasons. The imbalance between the human needs and what the environment in return can give it to us. Again, pollution. Pollution has been a major threat since several years, since the period of colonial period, industrial era. It has been a major threat. More than 10 million or 7 to 10 million people are dying every year because of the air pollution. And this marine pollution, all the chemicals, all the plastics, whatever that you use from the land, it drains directly into the marine environments, and we don't realize that it is coming back to us. You might have heard about the Minamata's disease that happened in Japan, right? The mercuric poison. Mercuric poison once reached the marine environment, it was consumed by the fishes over there, and it gets accumulated inside the tissues of the animals. When we consume it back, it gets into our system with a process called biomagnification. So we have to realize that whatever that we produce, whatever that we send, it's coming back to us soon. And so can you tell me, like, from which river this is? What you're seeing is a river. It's not a terrestrial environment, it's a river. This photograph was taken from River Ganga, one of the worst polluted rivers in the country, and the water quality has been assessed, and scientists are very sure about not using this water even for agricultural purposes. But happy news is that in the recent times, this river is now recovering. From 2014 to 2021, the quality of water has recovered tremendously, and that's a good news to share. And this land accumulation, again, this land accumulation, this filtration, it penetrates into the land, again drains into the water bodies, again reaches the marine ecosystems and coming back to us. So this is something which was very interesting. I was really surprised on looking at some of the research articles and popular articles on poaching and wildlife trading. Can you imagine the total value of this wildlife trading is ranging between 4 billion to 20 billion every year. This is only from the known sources. There are a lot of illegal activities that are happening in the gray market, which is not accounted. Imagine. So most of the times, the birds are the first victims, followed by the mammals. This is the anteaters, for example. Around 6,000 anteaters poached between 2009 to 2017 only from India. And this is only the accounted ones. So people consider that this is only marginal, maybe less than 2% of it. So imagine all of them were caught, it would be more than 1 lakh. They're already vulnerable. They have been mainly traded for their scales as well as for their flesh, which is considered as a tonic food, and also they have got a lot of medicinal properties. Invasive properties. There are some plants which are very invasive, like Prosopis juliflora, Parthenium, and Lantana camera. So what makes them invasive? A species is said to be invasive when they have a wider ecological amplitude, which means the ability to survive anywhere in the world by changing their adaptations. So these are some of the species. And I will give you a small example of with us. There are two categories of people in the class. One gets 100% with his own efforts. One managed to get only 80%. But he still comes first. You know why? He somehow restricts others not to cross 80%. So they do the similar thing. They have something called negative allelopathic effect. They produce some chemicals that doesn't allow any plants to go around them, called as negative allelopathy. Okay. Climate change, this is one of the most, in fact, a fancier term these days. All other things, all other threats are somehow fundamentally connected to climate change. And much have been discussed about the climate change and its effects on the terrestrial environment. And I have not seen in many places people presenting it on its impact on the marine environment. So I have taken a slide only on the marine ecosystems. What are the impacts of the climate change on the marine ecosystems? About, see, we do all kind of activities. We increase the carbon dioxide level in the planet, but somehow we are still managing, still surviving. It's because of these huge water bodies. They absorb to 90% of what we emit to the planet back. So, but it comes at the expense of the life of the marine habitats. Like, for example, the sea level is rising, the bleaching is happening in the corals, and then the toxic, it promotes the growth of toxic algae and the habitat destruction, acidification of the water, and also it disturbs the fisheries and affects marine food production locally as well as globally. So I would like to talk more on this coral reefs. Like, how many of you know about corals? Whether corals are plants or animals, what are they? They are just calcium carbonate structures. Reptiles. Okay. Okay, in fact, this is one of the misconceptions we have about corals. Corals are in fact animals. But however, they do have a symbiotic relationship with plants in the form of algae. So they are nothing but a calcium carbonate structures that provides shelter for algae, and algae in return gives them energy in the form of photosynthesis. So it's a kind of relationship that has been existing. But because of the increasing temperature, this algae and algal growth cannot withstand the higher temperature, and hence the bleaching even happens. Bleaching is nothing but the removal or destruction of algae from the coral reefs. So when the algae is removed, they are starving of food, and ultimately it leads to the loss of coral reefs, right? And already more than 25% of the coral reefs are threatened globally. What we actually lose, I've been talking about this for the last 20-25 minutes or maybe 30 minutes. What we actually lose out of it? Why I'm shouting like this? Well, most of us don't know what we are losing because we don't know what we are getting out of it, right? Why it should be considered? Because there are a wide variety of ecosystem services that we are enjoying or benefiting on a day-to-day basis, which we are not thankful to the ecosystems. The ecosystem services are of 4 different groups: provisioning, regulating, cultural, and supporting. For example, water, food, the clean water that we get, the food we get from the plants, the medicine that is derived from the plant matters, and raw materials, the flood control activity, climate change mitigation. So all these are ecosystem services. The only drawback is no one can quantify the ecosystem services. How much amount of clean air I'm getting? What is the value for it? How much amount of clean water I'm getting? What is the value for it? So nobody can quantify it. But in 2015, Government of India and Ministry of Environment, under Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, has launched a project on estimating the ecosystem services, starting from the sacred groves or the small forest patches. And I was fortunate to be the part of the team. I was working for 4 years in the same project, and we have already submitted the quantified value of those ecosystem services. If not everything, at least 5 of these services we have quantified, and results are already submitted. It's an all India coordinated project, and hence we are waiting for the others to submit the data, and hopefully we'll get the quantified ecosystem services from India at least very soon. So these are some of the global conservation efforts, like Convention of Biological Diversity, United Nations Framework on Convention on Climate Change. Many such bodies are operating worldwide, even in India, National Mission for Green India, National Wildlife Action Plan. So despite publishing a lot of work, despite allotting a lot of funds for the research, despite having a lot of conservation efforts, it is still progressing. What does it signify? Where it leads to? Are we on the track? We have already reached the point where we cannot take any risk beyond this. We have already given an irreversible damage. Anything beyond this would be disastrous. Are we on the track? A big no. I'll give you one example as CDM. So this is Clean Development Mechanism, which is sponsored by the United Nations Framework on Convention on Climate Change. So it says the carbon emissions that is being released by the developed countries or the list A countries, around 35 countries in the world, can be traded by the reforestation activities that is happening in the non-listed countries around the world. So they have given a protocol which is very complex, first of all, around 600, 700 pages. It's difficult for anyone to understand. It took me around 6 months to understand what it is completely. Okay, so they say clearly the protocol for everything is defined, but for one place, the choice of species. They have not defined anything about what kind of species you have to plant. And people has taken it for granted. They started planting all the fast growing trees which are non-native to the environment. So whether the ecological sustainability is addressed in this project, just for the sake of planting some trees and getting benefited out of it, people started planting acacias all over just to get the returns in no time. So the ecological sustainability is not delivered. There are loopholes everywhere. Right from Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement, governments and organizations, this is probably one of the fewest occasions that all the global nations have come together and agreed to work together, which is a big thing. But what we have achieved out of it, where it went wrong. So these are some of the two things that I assess personally. Developmental trade-off. Are we trading off the development with the nature? And the second one is the pluralism. So this is very important. I personally feel this is very, very, very important. People are conserving the forest or the biodiversity since very, very long time. They have their own traditions. They have their own methods of conserving the places and the environment where they are living. But the modern approach or the westernized approach that we are following today, all the that leads to the conflict between the local communities who are actually protecting the forest and the policymakers. So this has to be sorted out very clearly. I'll cite one example for this. I have worked on the community managed sacred forests across South India, at least in Tamil Nadu, and also in the privately managed forests. So among all these things, I would rate the sacred forest the best in terms of diversity. There is no police protection. There is no strict laws. You can enter anytime, but still it has been maintained very properly, very strictly. They have their own traditions. They have their own rituals. They believe that the forest belongs to the god themselves. So they have been protecting this forest since very long time, even before these laws and policies came into operation. I have not seen anyone taking out the leaf from the forest. I have not seen anyone taking out the twig from the forest. I have not seen anyone hunting animals inside the forest. But rest all happens in other forests despite having a lot of protection. So I leave the decision to you all. What next? Are we heading towards the 6th extinction event? What is mass extinction? Again, this is one of the very familiar terms. Mass extinction is when the 70% more than 70% of the known species goes extinct in a short period of time. So short period of time in a geological time scale is around 2 million years. Yeah, so these are the 5 major events that has happened in the Earth's history, with the maximum destruction happened at the end of Permian period, which is 250 million years ago. And currently, we are going through Anthropocene, the 6th major extinction. Many scientists have predicted it. Still, it's under the controversy, but many people have predicted in near term that the extinction rates are driven by the human activities. We will see why. Where are we now? So as I said, in order to reach the 70% mark to be eligible to call as a major extinction event, we are somewhere here. Around 1% of species have already gone extinct since 1500. And if it continues like this, we will see the scenarios, different scenarios. Yeah. So if it continues like this, and if we lost all the threatened species in another 500 years, it might take 11,326 years to reach the sixth major extinction. This is with birds. And with mammals, it may take around 7,593 years. Similarly, with amphibians, by the next century, if all the threatened category amphibians goes extinct, so within 242 years, maybe like 4 or 5 generations from now, we can witness the sixth major extinction. And that's why it is rightly called extinction. See, the human migration and the extinction of large mammals. So the large mammals and the human migration coexist, very obvious now. Can we stop it? Can we stop it? It's still possible. As I said, all other major extinctions are because of the geological events. And this time it's in our over it. It's not too late. So these are my recommendations. Policy making should be on the region specific and it should involve the local communities. The policymakers can say many things, but they are the one who are going to be there. So it should probably involve the local communities. Integrated approach. Climate change and biodiversity are one of the most, as I said, like the commonest topics in research articles, but they have been carried out independently. So there we need an integrated approach where climate change and biodiversity are merged together as they are fundamentally connected. Protected areas, increase the protected areas, and sustainability. This is self-explanatory. Alternate source of energy, strict laws and governance, environmental education, and as I said earlier, every head count. Like it's not the responsibility of the scientists or the policymakers. It's a collective responsibility of all the citizens of the planet. If we are not willing to participate, then the process of getting our environment back will only be a daydream. Thank you all. Yes, sir. Sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vivek Pandi. Questions?
I have several questions. Since I am your neighbor in the MCNS, I can discuss with you. But now I have 3 questions.
Yes, sir.
You said biodiversity is lost. So compared to industrial revolution, before industrial revolution and today, what is the percentage that is lost? That is the first question. Second question is, since civilization index, our civilization index is very different from 1000 years back. So it is a necessary part of destruction because of food and civilization index, what I say, present status of living. So to what extent these competing factors you can save the biodiversity? Is it possible to save? Fine. Third question is, our Mysore Jaggi Sadhguru is there. He is also on Save Planet mission. How much it has contributed? Is it possible to, his efforts are any? Because I am one of the followers, so I'm asking this question.
Okay, sir. I deliberately did not discuss many of the economic parameters. There is something called ecological economics or environmental economics. And so if I open up this topic, it may lead up to controversies, but I can answer you in a very simple way. I do not have the data for the post-industrialization and pre-industrialization, but obviously there would be difference. That was the time it was started and it was necessitated. That was all fine. There was a time where the laws were not very strict, and there was the time we did not feel the climate change. In fact, all these biodiversity laws and the terms were coined in the late 1980s, in the beginning of 1980s, and it was conceptualized only in 1992. So earlier data, I do not have to present you. The second one, so there is something called sustainability. Yeah, we have to, that's what I said, the trade-off. The trade-off has to be properly negotiated. What we are losing and how we are compensating it. I have seen in many mining activities, as a compensatory reforestation project, they have planted trees which are not native to that area. So that we can act upon it. It has to be properly channeled and properly utilized. I mean, the trade-off has to happen properly. The third question is, yeah, so any kind of such initiative is always welcomed as long as it is going to benefit the nature. irrespective of X, Y, Z, who is doing.
It is very interesting topic. So one small comment.
Yes.
And in our early scriptures like Puranas and all that, there is a specific number that is given for the number of species. It says 86.4 lakhs. So your number is more or less the same. So it is there in the very ancient Puranas. Chaturasiti Lakshanam, it says.
Wow.
That means Chaturasiti Laksham means 86.4. So that is very close to your number.
Yes, it's 87 lakh. That was the closest estimate now.
Yeah, that's an approximation.
Yes,
it looks like a roundup.
Microorganisms. So there are many fun factors, like once the scientists from some universities in US, they have taken out the samples from the belly buttons of the students, got 1,400 new species just from that. So that has been the diversity of species in this planet.
Yeah, and another thing is community, working with the community. For example, you mentioned a community where they are protecting by a custom,
yes,
or by a tradition. And actually, most of us probably have been doing that. We had been respecting trees, plants, and at least specific trees. We gave them the space of, the status of God. For example, Ashwatha tree and all that, which is called Arasamaram in Tamil. You know that. I don't know the.
Yes, sir.
It is not banyan tree. It is something else. So even now, it is considered as God. That belief is there, but still, such places. Maybe you are mentioning a village, okay, and such villages have become urban area now. So slowly, that the community that is protecting itself is going to a corner. Okay, it was a big community earlier. The community exists in a corner now. Okay, so what do you mean by including the community in biodiversity protection? Because the community itself is not there. It is reducing, and it will be nowhere after some time. Okay, that is one thing. The other thing is survival. Fittest will survive, or mightiest will survive. So this applies to humans, and he has all the procedures to survive at the cost of other species. Okay, suppose you think once upon a time we had a lot of dinosaurs in the world, and they are extinct due to some other natural phenomenon. In case they survived, they would not have probably allowed any other species to survive.
Correct.
So this also could have happened. So one species, somehow or other, the mighty species coming and destroying the other species is also part of nature. So unless you destroy some amount of forest, some amount of other species, how can humans survive? Okay, this also has to be taken into account. Maybe you can advise people should not be greedy. That is the only thing. This advice has always been there all the time. Okay. So all these things have to be taken into account collectively before taking any decision. Just like that, you make a rule and say that you don't destroy this and destroy that. So if my survival depends on destroying something, I will prefer that. It may be wrong, and okay, but still I have no other go. This is one thing. And another point is thinking of biodiversity protection. Okay, just because certain species are destroyed, humans are affected. For example, if you allow dirty water to go into the sea, it comes back to you in the form of fish. So you are threatened. Okay, one aspect is just because humans themselves are threatened, you are cautious about it. You take steps, and in a deeper thinking, every other species, by their own merit, their own right, they have a right to live, and we can only live with them. And it is not just because if I kill a species, it is not going to affect me in any future. Then I don't have just the right to kill it, isn't it? Most of the plants are focused on how it badly affects the humans themselves. But do we ever think that every other species has its own right to live?
Yeah, exactly the same question I was asking. So coming back to your comments, so if you go as per the survival of fittest, we don't have to evolve ourselves first of all. We are after all social animals. Because otherwise, if I need a food, I cannot go fight someone, I cannot eat someone. So we have socially evolved, and it's our collective responsibility. That's what I was trying to say. So the survival of fittest doesn't work everywhere, particularly with us. So that is point number one. Point number two is extinction is a natural event that is happening everywhere, and that is what we believe, that is what we study in evolution. But the rate at which it progresses, that matters the most. We are inducing it to happen much faster than it could actually happen. So naturally it will happen, yes, the survival of fittest, everything is perfect, but it is not applicable to humans because we are socially evolved. We are not living in the jungle, to say, to stick to your comments. So I strongly reject that, and I would say since we are socially evolved, it's our collective responsibility to responsibly operate on the biological diversity. And also, as I said, I clearly mentioned that even a loss of single species can have a significant effect on us. And all my presentation was based on the anthropocentric view, as you are again watching, because at least by saying so, we would be very conscious in saving us at least. If I go and say, as Sar was saying, that this plant is going to die for no reasons, nobody will be interested in protecting it. But at least if I say with some data, if you kill this plant, you are losing this much, then at least they will be protecting it. So that is the factor behind it, the conversation, the factor behind it. And the first question is the communities. So I have seen in many places, as you said, these communities are moving away from the cities, but the concept of sacred forest is not in the cities. It is mostly towards the rural setup, and they are still conserving it. And yes, I have seen many people, because of the over traditional practices, they started clearing the forest and started constructing the temple. They have taken the concept and misunderstood the concept because they got a lot of money in hand now. So yeah, so these are some of the factors, and of course, again, I'm telling, so there are many particular factors which I cannot openly disclose, like environmental economics, as I said, which will lead to a lot of confusions. Yes, sir.
Last 2 years, Corona has not changed the slope of the decay curve. This Corona 2 years has not changed the slope of the decay curve. Curve is falling like that. It did not change the slope.
Of what, sir?
Biodegradation, biodiversity.
No, sir. Yeah. So that was in fact a good question. Surprising, it was the carbon dioxide ppm in the average global carbon dioxide rate has increased as per 2020 report. It has reached the value of 412.5, the highest in the last 8 lakh years, despite the lockdowns. And we really don't know what triggers it.
Yeah, it was a very good presentation.
Thank you, sir.
And biodiversity is a very complex issue being addressed from several people. And climate change is another very crucial aspect, which is playing a role in destruction of the biodiversity. But anyway, as he was mentioning, sacred groves. Sacred groves are still maintained.
Yes, sir.
Still nobody goes there to destroy it. They have a fear.
Yes.
Even if you go around, sacred groves are plenty around Mangalore and this region. Even if you just take your car and go a little bit further, 10 kilometers from here, you may find a sacred grove, which is totally pristine. You can't touch anything and nobody touches. So if it has to get destroyed, it has to be happening in the natural course. So that is one thing. And secondly, coming to this coral bleaching, as geologists, we understood that coral bleaching is basically the corals that have been vacated by these polyps, that the organisms that were living there.
Yes.
And then due to the kind of increase in the temperature, the seawater, the acidification increases.
Yes, sir.
Because of the acidification, they kind of dissolve the corals, and that leads to coral bleaching.
Yes, sir.
And you can see very large amount of white patches in the surface, I mean ocean water, if you look at the satellite images. Yes, of course, corals are getting terribly disturbed.
Yes, sir.
And it's a very alarming thing to happen, because more than the terrestrial environment, immediate responses are seen in the oceanic environment.
Right.
So that is one aspect. So these are certain things, but of course development has to take place. We have to, but then we have to be a little bit more responsible in destroying our surroundings and environment. And with regard to monoculture, if we have a monoculture somewhere, then it concentrates one species, and then if the species gets affected by certain pests and things like that, the whole place gets destroyed. There is no natural barrier for such kind of a spread. That is one thing. And secondly, there are other lot of issues like groundwater depletion and certain other kinds of things. So we have to be a little careful while adopting to these kind of monocultural practices. But then we have to also have our own food and such other luxuries in life. So we go ahead. And one aspect which I wanted to also bring to your notice is that carbon credit. Even to this day, I don't believe in carbon credit. See, I tend to destroy because I have a lot of money. And I ask you to kind of conserve it. In what way it is going to help my country, I really can't understand. It is something very, it's not a very good policy. It's a highly skewed policy.
The system itself is very complex. In fact,
It's
only
not
just
correct.
1% of CDM policy is under forestry.
It's not correct at all. Thank you.
The news items increase whenever there is a meet, global meet.
Yes, sir.
Can you show that? The average envelope is increasing. So there is
No, each one corresponds to the particular year, sir. Number of articles published on the particular year. So, but the drop down after this one, COP 15, if you could see, immediately dropped down in the next year. It came down to 600 from 2000. It's a steep fall. No, collectively it is increasing. If you consider the accumulative number, it is increasing. But it gets the peak consideration only when there is a happening, and in the next of the year it is nothing. So the problem that I found is the effect of this climate change or biodiversity loss is not spontaneous. What we do today, maybe someone will feel the effect after 200 years or 100 years. What we are facing today is because of the effect of maybe the 19th century or 20th century. This is not like a quick reflex that you touch a hard pan, immediately take your hand. But it's happening, it's real.
Nice presentation, sir. Thank you. You have mentioned the number of species that have already been extinct. I was wondering, is there any estimation of how many new species have been originated?
Okay. Yes. So on an average per year, around 18,000 species are newly described. On an average, 18,000 species are newly described. And again, I'm telling you, these are the species which is known to us, which is catalogued. There are many species which we cannot even find in our lifetime.
So yeah, I was wondering whether nature is in any way compensating for all the species that have been.
So see, for you cannot compensate with 18,000 microorganisms with 18,000 tree species. In India we have around 21,000 species, and you can simply go destroy all the 21,000 species, and you can say I'm replacing it with 21,000 microorganisms. Doesn't.
What about the typical period of any formation?
1.3 million years.
Okay, but that varies from species to species.
Yes, for microorganisms it happens very much faster.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question out of curiosity.
Yes.
The scientist you mentioned in the beginning who actually attempted to count the number of species in Earth, he used the methodology of
Pesticide.
using pesticides and
Yes.
herbicide.
Yes.
Was it actually welcomed?
No, it is not. Of course not.
Okay.
He killed around 2,200 species
Okay. Okay.
just to know how many species are there. Like, good that he has not killed everyone just to count how many dead bodies are there.
Okay. So, from the online audience, do you have any questions? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Professor Samyal from MS University, Baroda. Dr. Vivek,
Yes, sir.
can you hear me? I really appreciate you. Your the presentation was very. Actually, I'm a geologist by
Yes.
discipline,
Yes, sir.
and really I appreciate very good presentation, very with a lot of substance in it. And you mentioned about an extinction that is expected during Anthropocene. Did I hear you correctly, or you
Yes,
have some evidence to say so?
Sir, there are no direct evidence to say so, but these are extrapolated data considering the number of threatened species as of today, and based on the assumptions, what if all these threatened species go extinct in 1 century, and what if all these threatened species go extinct in 500 years? So this is based on that, sir. We do not have any direct data.
Okay.
Based
No,
on
but really I appreciate you have you understand a lot of geology problems also at the same time, though you are a botanist. Really good work, good work. I am really happy. Congratulations, very good.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Means a lot.
Yeah.
So thank you for really nice presentations. So you said that corals are animals. So how do you what makes them animals? Like what factors or what?
So I have to say their cell wall do not have cell membrane.
So like usually what I thought was like animals move or there are certain.
They are static. That's their strategy.
Okay.
And that is they get the support from the algae to produce energy, and in turn they give shelter to the algae.
Okay. So,
Mutualistic relationship, symbiotic relationship.
okay. Thank you, sir.
Basically, the algae tries to kind of design the structure of the coral.
They use the colorings, outer colorings, and also
structure also. It's like how we build our houses. Like algae, they are all like staying in a small flat kind of a thing. How they build the whole structure perhaps depends on the algae, and then it builds the structure of the corals. As such, corals, they look like plants, but they are not plants because they are totally made of calcium carbonate and there is no circulation, nothing. And they only have certain holes wherein these small animals, they live there. And once they die, the coral also is not in a position to sustain itself. Slowly it will get depleted and gone.
This is particularly common with
something
the shallow
similar
water.
to your shells. When the animal is there, the shell is also growing. When the animal dies, the shell just slowly gets disintegrated over a period of time.
Yeah, I have one doubt which I have been discussing or asking many people. See, this is about the carbon footprint which people talk about. When a plant grows to a tree, basically it takes the carbon and forms cellulose, right? Carbon is stored as cellulose. So once it becomes a big tree and it is towards end of its major growth, then it will fall down and that carbon is released back to the nature. So if you really want to think of a carbon controlling, when a plant becomes a big tree, immediately you should cut it and save it safely somewhere, right? Either as a furniture or under the sea where there is no oxygen, no oxidation happens. So that, or anaerobic regions, it can be like under the trench or somewhere, so that all that carbon is properly protected without going back to the nature, right? Ideally, if you think from a physics point of view.
So ideally, if you can say just before they die,
just
that
before,
would be much better.
Correct. When,
not at the earlier
but
stage.
The problem is, as you told, if you cut a tree and do this, as a physics person, this is the right thing to do. When the carbon is all stored as a cellulose, You cut it, save us, make furnitures or something and save it without burning, without going back. But it will affect the ecology. When you cut a tree, it affects.
I'm sorry to differ because Earth and the life forms, everything has an equilibrium. There is an equilibrium status. And man came into existence and he started meddling with that equilibrium. And slowly and steadily, the nature is showing its response. And that response is going to be huge. We will not be in a position, either physics or chemistry, it is not going to solve anybody's problem. Unfortunately, earth science, not many fellows recognize, though we live in earth and we need to learn a lot about earth, and that somehow has taken a very back seat. So carbon is required. It's not that carbon is bad. If there is no carbon in the atmosphere, there is going to be a problem. You and I will not live. We have also carbon, and carbon is extremely essential like oxygen. So we cannot.
Yeah, but this global warming people says it is carbon dioxide is increasing.
Increasing. Why? Because of your increased activities like pollution. See, some 200, 300 years ago, before the industrialization, how were we moving? Either we were walking or we were going in a bullock cart or some kind of a thing. Today we move around in this automobiles, and for that we get the petrol from a different ecosystem altogether, feed it into this ecosystem, and then create the pollution, and that spreads into the atmosphere. So that is how accelerated. We are accelerating the process because of which the equilibrium is getting lost. That is why it is increasing. And when it is increasing, it's creating other things. Okay. So when there is more carbon, that greenhouse effect comes into effect, and then there is a glacial melting. Glacial melting, sea level rise. When the sea level rises, coral bleaching and other things, and many coastal cities are submerged. So it's a chain reaction. It's a very slow thing. Today, if you stop, it's like applying brake in an ocean-going vessel. If you apply a brake, it will take its own time to go and stop. So it's like that. Earth is like a huge ship.
Agreed.
So you can't start it. And if it is running, it has to run it on its own. And we can't stop it also, just like that. So that is how it is. So we have to be careful. What actions we take today we may not be here to see those results, but then it is required to be taken. Rather, the other day we had a meeting some 5-6 years ago, I remember. I was handling certain programs in DST wherein climate change was being discussed. I asked one of the experts, what should we do for climate change? Then he said, don't do anything. Don't do anything. It will automatically, everything will come. The moment you do something, you are spoiling everything. So that's how it is.
System is inherently resilient by itself. And there has to be a balance between CO2 and oxygen level as well. If you take back the historic past, many ice age, everything happened because after plants colonized the land, they increased the oxygen level, and there was a sudden dip in carbon dioxide, resulted in ice age. Many events have happened before, but it has to be maintained in a proper way. I mean, like in the optimal levels.
Forests were on fire. Forests were on fire. They were killing thousands, millions of species, and a lot of carbon dioxide, carbon is released into atmosphere.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So that's why again I'm saying that they are inherently resilient without our intervention. Since we came back, we are not allowing them to be resilient. Some species goes extinct. See, because after all the major events in Permian era around 250 million years ago, 96% of the known species were destroyed. But still around today, we have around 80 lakh 7 species estimated. So that is how it comes. The turnover happens. But we should allow some time, some space that we are not giving.
Any questions from the online audience? No. You can unmute yourself and ask. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Vivek Pandi, for a wonderful presentation. We will be, I think, Director Sir would like to talk something. You told no? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.